Aloha, my kako. My name is Doug Harper. I am the Executive Director for Mālama Maunalua. I want to welcome you to the 2023 Spring Internship Program final presentations. The interns have been hard at work for the past 10 weeks working on a series of different projects, and this will be the final presentation presenting on what they saw. So I'm going to take a few minutes now, go over a little bit about the organization, the region we work with or work in, and then a little bit about the internship program. So if you aren't familiar, this is Maunalua Bay. It's in southeast Oahu. It's one of the largest bays in the States, and also one of the most populous. There is roughly 50 to 60,000 people that live along here and 11 shopping centers. And if you look closely, you'll see there's a lot of gray right along the coast. Roughly 90 to 95% of that coastal strip is paved, is impervious surface, which means that water can't penetrate it. And then the upper green area is where we still have forests, but has also been heavily impacted by ungulates or pigs, invasive species. And all of this has led to a fairly significantly degraded Maunalua Bay. And in 2005, a hui or group of longtime residents that lived in the area saw that the bay wasn't what it used to be. It wasn't what they remember as kids. And so they wanted an organization, because there wasn't one, that was focused on restoring the health of the bay. And so they founded, as I stated in 2005, Mālama Maunalua, with the purpose of reversing that degradation or halting it and starting to bring back some of the balance, some of the biodiversity, some of the species that they remembered as kids. And so how does the internship program fit in this? Well, a number of years ago, we undertook we wrote a conservation action plan. And what that is we sat down with residents experts. This was cultural experts, scientific, longtime residents, and said, what has changed? What do you see as being the big issues? And what do we need to do to address it? And so from that conservation action plan, we identified what the biggest threats were to the bay. And we found three, which was one, overutilization of the resources, two, invasive alien algae, and three, stormwater runoff, and started to kind of come up with tick off some of the projects that needed to be done to address those issues. And so every single year, we start by looking at what the Conservation Action Plan generally has told us, what projects are ripe. So where are there opportunities for us to affect change? We basically list those out and then give those to the staff. Where can I pick up some of these projects? Where can some of the other staff do stuff? And so we start to identify which projects are going to be undertaken that year, but also we start to see, where are there gaps? Where are there projects that are ripe, that are necessary, but we don't have the capabilities of handling right now? It is those projects that then become intern projects. And so one of the things that I think is really interesting about our internship program is that the interns get the experience of doing real world projects with the mentorship of Mālama Maunalua staff, and seeing their projects then help us in restoring the bay. So everything that they're undertaking is critical for us in helping to restore the bay. And so what you're going to hear today is each of the interns talking about what their project was, a little bit about its importance, and then what the final outputs were. But one thing I want to emphasize with all this is they did a ton of different things. And so what you're hearing about is just one aspect of what their internship program was. So you'll hear, for instance, about urchin seeding and doing studies on urchins in the water. But all of those interns also did stuff with partners, also helped each other on their projects. And so don't think that what you're hearing is the totality of what they did. They did a whole slew of different things and really helped partners in the entire region improve through the work they were willing to put in. Before I hand off over to the interns, I want to give a big mahalo to these funders you see here: Kwaniani, Omidyar, the Atherton Family Foundation, Cook Foundation, Marissal Foundation, Long Foundation. All of these donors were able to provide funds that help us provide supplies and provide a stipend for the interns and all the hard work they put in. I also want to thank all of our partners and all of the people who donated to the organization. Without all of this, there's no way we could do the work that we currently do, and there's no way we could have as fruitful an internship program as we are having. So protocol for this meeting, everyone's microphones will be muted, screens will be blacked out. If you have a question, type it into the chat box. It's something that's good. While you're thinking of it, type it up, and at the end of the intern presentation, which will be about 6 or 7 minutes, they'll be able to answer it. Ones that we aren't able to get to, we'll be able to type into the chat box later. Zoom recently updated their software, so you should be able to see the speaker up in the corner of your screen. If you can't, just minimize the screen, and then you should be able to see the presentations and the speakers. And lastly, enjoy. They have put in a lot of work over the past 10 weeks, and so I hope you're as impressed as I am in everything that they were able to accomplish. And finally, I just want to say, if there's anyone watching who's interested in interning, or you have people that are interested in interning, may know someone, we have the summer internship cohort is being advertised right now. So anyone that is interested in applying or may know someone to apply, please let them know about the program. And then with that, I would like to hand it off to our first speaker, Angelina. We're at about 6:08. We're going to try and stick a little bit to the timing in case people are logging in to see a specific speaker, but I think we're close enough at this point to bring in Angelina. Mahalo and enjoy.
I'm Angelina. For the spring season with Mālama Maunalua, I worked on phase 4 of the Urchin project. On the right there is Kate from the Division of Aquatic Resources, myself, and my mentor Pam. Before I get into the details of my project, just a little bit about me. I grew up here on Oahu in Kalihi Valley, and I've always been drawn to the outdoors and our relationship with Mother Nature and our natural resources, which is part of what drew me to participate and apply to intern with Mālama Maunalua. So a little bit of my background, I graduated from the University of Manoa in 2017 with a Bachelor of Arts in Economics. I applied what I learned there and eventually started a small farm business in San Diego. It thrived, but COVID brought me home, and I am currently a freelance travel advisor, helping people plan vacations and also trying to get my foot in the door in the field of conservation. So getting into my project, the aim for this was to investigate the efficacy of urchin grazing as a biocontrol agent for invasive algae through experimental design in Maunalua Bay. So just to clarify that a little bit and break it up, the urchins we used were collector urchins, and they're also native to Hawaii. And their scientific name is Trypnustes gratilla, or Hawaii mauli in Hawaiian. They eat algae, so as a form of biocontrol, meaning they naturally remove the pests from the environment. And this is important and relevant to Mālama Maunalua's work because it serves as a potential alternative or supplement to the manual huki removal, which is currently what we are doing by hand through our community, corporate, and educational huki events. This would not be possible without our partnership with the Division of Aquatic Resources, who supplied our urchins through their hatchery. And phase 1 through 3 of the project tested for urchin survivorship and cage construction. Cages are where we contain the urchins so that they don't escape when we put them out in the open water. So phase 4, they supplied us with 20 juvenile urchins about the size of a thumbnail. And the experimental design was pretty straightforward here. We had 4 cages that we had deployed out in the open water. 2 of them had 10 urchins each, and 2 of them served as a control. And once we deployed them, we monitored for algae coverage before and after. and also monitored for urchin health, so their size and color. This is where we outplanted the urchins. This is Wailupe Bay. This is the first time that the Urchin project has deployed urchins in this area. Typically, it's been in the Paico area, east of Wailupe. And so this is the first time here that we were doing this. This is just what it looks like from the surface. The majority of what you're looking at here is Gorilla Ogo or Gracilaria salicornia. On the left there is just an up close of what it looks like when you grab a handful. And on the bottom of that is what one of the cages looks like submerged in this area here. Here's some behind the scenes photos of our process, getting the cages out there, weighing them down with bricks. And once secure, this is what it looks like, weighed down with sandbags. On the middle there are the urchins before we deployed them. We measured again for diameter and health. And then on the right there is just a bird's eye view of the built-in quadrat that we use to measure at every point the depth of algae coverage. And in this case, all of it was mostly Gracilaria salicornia or Gorilla Ogo. So these are the results here. They weren't what was predicted. We did see an increase in algae abundance, which wasn't expected. We would expect a decrease in algae for the cages with urchins, which you could see with the stars underneath are the ones with urchins. But overall, there wasn't an increase, and there could have been a lot of different factors to that, like human error in taking data or potentially a fluctuation in temperature and salinity. But you can see there that there's slightly less of an increase of algae in the cages with urchins, but they are young and small still, meaning they aren't consuming as much as bigger urchins, which could be a factor. And with that being said, this is still an experiment in progress, and the next steps are to continue monitoring and just seeing how much they consume as they grow, which will probably be more. The expectation is that as the urchin grows larger, they will consume more algae, and it'll be more of a noticeable difference. You can see in the picture there are two. They're a little hard to see, which is also part of what makes it a little difficult at this stage to collect data. They're so tiny. So once they grow older, they'll be a lot easier to locate, hopefully. And just to recap, overall, my experience with Mālama Maunalua has been very positive, and I wish I could do it again. Some of the highlights included picking mangrove with the tree to sea campers during spring break. On the top left there, we collected a bunch of mangrove from the Paico Sanctuary, and also husking coconuts with the Maunalua Fish Pond Heritage Center, and eating the coconut right there on the spot. And just practicing Hawaiian and learning just the importance of local restoration and giving back to where we live. I gained a lot of skills, being that my background is not in science. This is my first time taking benthic data and in identifying invasive plant algae, which we do during our community Huki events, and I was able to apply that directly to my research. And yeah, moving forward, I just feel a lot better going into this field and have a better idea of where I could potentially contribute. And yeah, I just want to say thank you overall to all of our partners and staff and other interns for sharing their wealth of knowledge and being so supportive. And that being said, I'll just take any questions that anyone might have from here.
All right, so we do have a couple of questions that are entering the chat right now. I'll read them out for you, Angelina, and just answer them to the best of your ability. Amy's got a question, and she's asking if the cages are still there deployed at Wailupe.
They are still there, and the intent is to continue this project. We're just waiting on permit approval to exceed 30 days. of it being there, which is the current limit of time.
Perfect. Someone's also asking why you guys chose Wailupe as a study site this time around, as opposed to the Paiko region, which you had done the studies in the past.
I think that they just wanted something different. That was the overall consensus. And I know that the Paiko area has been hookied a bunch, meaning to pull. So we were able to pull a lot of algae already. So I think we just wanted a new environment.
Awesome. One of the other questions in the chat is if there were any measurements taken for temperature or salinity within the water.
No, but that's a potential future experiment that I was thinking about, which could help in gaining just more accurate data in the future to take away another factor or clarify some of this data that I had gotten.
Awesome.
So that's a good point.
Perfect. One of the other questions that we have in the chat is just about if these urchins eat other types of algae.
They do, and I have data with other algae, and in the area that we surveyed, we had prickly seaweed, Padina, and Spiridia. The last two were native, and the first one, this prickly seaweed, is another invasive, but the levels of those were just insignificant, so I chose not to include them in my chart. But just so you know, they were there.
Perfect. Thanks, Angelina. So we're going to switch off now. I think Emily is going to trade off with you, and we'll let her take it away.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Emily Carter and I'm going to be talking to you today about coral reef conservation in Maunalua Bay. So a little bit about me to start. I'm originally from Los Angeles, but currently live in Wailua. I have a Bachelor's of Science from UC Berkeley in Conservation and Resource Studies, and I'm about to start a Master's of Biology from Miami University. I'm also the small business owner of Lalo Designs. To start off with a little background, why do we care so much about conserving and restoring coral reefs? Well, because they're important, obviously. They're important to our local tourism economy, for food production and fisheries, and are one of the most biodiverse ecosystems on the planet when they're healthy. However, as many of you already know, our reefs are also in trouble and threatened by a number of things such as ocean acidification, polluted runoff, and global warming that leads to coral bleaching. Alongside partners in the Restore with Resilience program, have been trying to give coral a fighting chance for years in their effort to outplant thermally resilient coral, monitor the reef, and educate the public. During my internship, I contributed to this project and goal through two main avenues. The first was by further exploring how the community can be engaged, and the second was to create a baseline data set to inform decisions about restoration opportunities. The first avenue I'm going to talk about today is community engagement. The main way that we are engaging the community is conserving and restoring the main way that we're engaging the community in conserving and restoring coral is through Hanapakoa events. Hanapakoas are community events run by and HIMB where coral is fragmented for outplanting to regenerate the reef, and volunteers are educated on issues facing coral. hopes to resume Hanapakoa events on a monthly basis in the near future. In light of this, I helped to create a menu of options to help facilitate various group sizes and demographics, from large public events to small classroom groups. I also created additional educational and outreach materials to be used during Hanapakoas, including coral reef jeopardy and ocean acidification Jenga. The second avenue that I worked toward has been creating a baseline data set. The two main goals in establishing baseline data are to first create a reference point that may be used in the future to gauge management impacts and overall condition change. The second is to generate tools for finding and comparing potential coral outplanting sites. The data that this analysis is based off of has been obtained by MM's coral monitoring efforts, which I, alongside my mentor and fellow interns, have added to in the last 10 weeks. The protocol involves recording 3 types of data: coral health, recorded as color, fish present, and photographs of the benthic composition. By the way, benthic refers to the ocean floor. The first thing I did with our monitoring data was to plot the completed transects using GIS so that we could visually demonstrate how comprehensive our understanding of the nearshore reef in Maunalua Bay is. It has also been helpful to plan monitoring outings to fill in the gaps. The next aspect that I analyzed was the biodiversity index at each site. A biodiversity index allows us to compare relative biodiversity within an ecosystem, as you can see plotted on this chart. This is determined by creating a ratio of the evenness, which is the number of fish observed, and the richness, which in this case means the number of fish families observed on the transect. Next, I analyzed fish population and composition at the family level. The top chart demonstrates the overall breakdown of fish that were recorded on all sites across Maunalua Bay, which may become a good reference baseline in the case that Maunalua Bay becomes a fisheries management area or to gauge general change over time. I also broke each site down into its own pie chart to allow for easy visual comparisons of diversity, as well as presence and density of indicator species. Presence of indicator species such as herbivorous parrotfish and surgeonfish, or culturally significant fish like kala or kole, can also be readily identified and compared. For example, when comparing Hunakai and Wailupe Beach Park, it appears that Hunakai has greater general diversity, as well as both parrotfish and surgeonfish present. Lastly, monitoring photographs of the benthic cover, which, to reiterate, means on the ocean floor, are uploaded to CoralNet. On CoralNet, 30 random points are allocated, and each point is ID'd. For example, point 10 is considered framework, while point 17 is Poecilopora meandrina, a type of coral. This gives us a good idea of what the benthic coverage is, whether it has live coral, historical coral, or maybe that area is covered with invasive macroalgae such as Gorilla Ogo and would not make a great outplanting site. All of this information ultimately aids decisions of where to outplant coral and is even more powerful when combined with our other metrics. A big thank you has to go out to Dr. Alex Barkman for curating MM's coral data. Ultimately, the impact of all of this is to contribute to MM's larger goal of restoring healthy coral to Maunalua Bay. Metrics on the current state allow us to gauge future change, and all of the data analysis will allow for coral outplanting sites to be better identified and compared. The community outreach efforts will also enable and educate the community in protecting their own natural, cultural, economic, and recreational resources. My personal favorite takeaways from this internship have been learning about local issues and initiatives in coral and coastal conservation, but I'm also very grateful for the wealth of knowledge that has been shared with us about Hawaiian history, language, and culture. I've also really appreciated gaining experience in monitoring marine environments, both through our coral monitoring, as well as the limu surveys done during Hukis. Lastly, but most importantly, meeting so many wonderful people has definitely been the biggest highlight. Thank you for listening. I can take questions now if anybody has any.
Hi, Emily. So we have a question in the chat, and the question is, do we know what the population breakdown is supposed to be in Maunalua Bay of the fish or the fisheries biomass?
I do not personally know that. I have only mapped out our findings from our monitoring, but I'll get back to you on a better breakdown if I can find one.
Like which species?
Okay, so one of the questions was just about what types of policies or rules or regulations could be enforced with like a fisheries management area if it were to take place in Maunalua.
So something that would potentially be enforced is limiting the amount of recreation, limiting the amount of commercial fishing, especially. So just changing what that could look like. yeah, just things along that line that kind of would generally limit mostly commercial use of the bay.
All right, I think that's it for questions for now. If anyone does have questions throughout the presentations, you're more than welcome to enter it into the chat at any time. If not, all three of our interns will be available for questions after as well. And so don't be shy. Up next, we're going to have Emily switch out with Sydney.
Aloha, my name is Sydney, and I am going to be presenting the work that I conducted this spring on green infrastructure use to mitigate runoff into Maunalua Bay under the direction of my mentor, our executive director, Doug Harper. So first off, a little bit about me. I was born and raised in the East Coast, where I received my bachelor's in chemistry before moving out to Colorado, where I worked for several years performing environmental pollutant research, mostly lab-based research in the Rocky Mountains. And then I moved out to Hawaii last summer to pursue my master's in marine science. And I was interested in pursuing an internship with for the sake of developing my field-based research skills. A lot of the work I've done in the past has been mostly lab-based, and also for transitioning my career into the field of conservation. And I was also excited to partake in nonprofit work and understand research at the nonprofit level. So a little bit about the Ahupua'a of Maunalua Bay, the land divisions that make up the region here. It is comprised of 10 watersheds. And as Doug mentioned earlier, within these watersheds, we have about 50,000 or more residences and 11 shopping centers, as well as 14 schools. So over the recent 50 years or more, we've seen a lot of rapid urbanization of this area throughout each of these 10 watersheds. And just to show an example of the runoff that can take place from these watersheds and out into the bay, I have the marina depicted here that is in Hawaii Kai. And this shows how, for example, one region where the runoff from the residences and the commercial centers can bring pollutants and agricultural and chemical pollutants and debris, as well as sedimentation from the construction zones and residences that are being built within the region. So each of the 10 watersheds is a source of pollutants into the bay, and there are methods that we can use to mitigate stormwater runoff and help to restore the natural ecosystem in the bay, where we see with these runoff pollutants, there is an increase in the nutrient overloading into the bay and the growth of some of the invasive species, particularly the algae that is taking over the native species in Maunalua Bay. Those of you who have followed this project in the past have probably heard it referred to as the Follow the Drop project, where in partnership with 3R Water, has promoted the use of this application to conduct rainwater assessments on properties. And moving forward, now that the community has an awareness of the rainwater assessment on their property, we can work towards implementing green infrastructure construction. So why green infrastructure? We know that this is a beneficial way to reduce the quantity or the amount of runoff that flows into the bay. So for example, using permeable roadways and walking paths to replace impervious surfaces such as asphalt or concrete paths, we can help to reduce and have these pathways absorb the amount of water and trap some of those pollutants before they then head off downstream. Also, rain barrels or rain gardens, as depicted with this rain barrel in the picture on the right, we can capture some of the rainwater and utilize that for different purposes on properties, such as watering the garden or using it in a more controlled manner, whereas otherwise rainwater would just flow over your property and carry some of those pollutants downstream into drainage ditches and ultimately out into the bay. At the beginning of this internship, I was able to participate in a site assessment at the Kahala Resort with Lauren Roth. I was shadowing her with Roth Ecological, and was able to see how these assessments are conducted and how we can look at a property and assess where would be an opportunity for GI installation to help mitigate the amount of water that would otherwise just run off directly into the ocean, as you see right off the side of the resort there. So throughout this internship, this 10-week program, I was able to produce 3 outcomes. And the first was working and talking with local contractors and landscapers, engaging a level of interest in working to understand how to construct GI. 2 landscapers and 1 garden designer in particular that I spoke with had an emphatic interest in collaborating on this effort. And I was able to gauge kind of what their level of education is on this, what training would be necessary, what some of the challenges might be, and also what resources might be needed to promote this program further. Then I also created a ranking criteria sheet, and I modeled this based off of other criterias that are used throughout other nationwide programs to determine which residences and commercial centers might be highest priority for ecological benefit into the bay by reducing runoff into the bay. So I kind of tailored this to cater to Hawaii state policies and policies specifically in Maunalua region and the Wailupe watershed plan. I also prioritized the point system based off of what would have the highest priority for restoring the natural hydrology and ecology in the bay, and what might bring the highest community value in terms of drinking water, recreational activities, other such important items that would be highest priority for allotting money for these projects. Then finally, to promote further community awareness, I developed a flyer that we could use to educate the community even more on what GI infrastructure is. Previous interns have worked directly with the homeowners, and so we can just continue promoting their awareness and their interest in GI on their properties so that we can move forward with implementation. So next steps would be to continue these discussions with the contractors that I spoke with. They were really eager to learn more about a program and receive training if that is available. So developing a training program would be a good next step. And then working with some of the state and local agencies to try and obtain funds to offset and subsidize the cost to homeowners for building GI on their properties. Overall, I was just really thankful for this opportunity to witness and be a part of the full Mauka to Makai vision, to have that experience both on land where we were planting some native tree species, and then in the heritage fish pond where we could see how that water composition can be altered by the flow of fresh water and how it's beneficial to maintaining the natural ecosystem in the bay. And in particular, I was really thankful to have the opportunity to engage with the community. This experience was the most thorough immersion in Hawaiian culture that I've received since moving here, and I really appreciated getting to know the culture and the people and understanding how important the land is and how we can protect the land down to the sea. So mahalo to Doug in particular for mentoring me through this project, and to Alex for giving me this opportunity and allowing my family and my kids to participate along with me. Also, thank you to Pam and Laura, Ralph, and all the CHLs for walking us through all of these experiences, teaching us about the bay, and giving us this opportunity. And I'll take any questions.
All right, so we do have a couple of questions, Sydney, in the chat. One of the questions is just regarding if you know if there are any policies that you'd recommend regarding the reduction of stormwater runoff.
Yeah, the one that was the most pertinent, I looked into, in particular, the Hawaii 305B and 305D, 303D, sorry. And I think the most important would probably be the Wailupe watershed plan, has the most relatable, beneficial policies focusing on Maunalua Bay specifically. And I think that one would probably be the highest priority to use. And also just looking at, you know, what we can base off of models that have been created. For example, the Bren School model that was previously created in partnership with is really beneficial for understanding what's going to restore the natural hydrology the most.
Awesome. So there is another question in the chat. It's from a homeowner, I think in the Maunalua region. They are wondering what they can do around their property or their residence if they're experiencing flooding or erosion or any type of stormwater runoff. What's something that they could do from home or in their own backyard?
Yeah, that's a great question. The simplest thing would be to just collect your rainwater. Obviously there's ways that we would hope to move forward with constructing something on your property that might be able to be more sustainable long-term and have a widespread impact on collecting that water. So that's why we're partnering with these local contractors to hopefully be able to provide resources through MM's recommendations to these contractors who can install GI on your property. But the simplest way is just if you have a very large bucket or a barrel of some sort to collect your rainwater, and you can take, a watering can and pull from it and water your garden with that. And that's just going to, if you watch the way that your water drains out of your gutters and just flows down the hill off your property, then you can understand how just collecting that water is really going to mitigate a lot of output from your specific property.
Awesome. And to follow up with that question, there is a question about cost. Do you know how much some of these green infrastructure implementation would cost?
That's a good question. I do not have the specific answer to that. In talking with some of the local contractors, I know that the biggest hiccup was or is going to be that a lot of them don't have training on this. Pretty much every contractor that I spoke with, which was about 10 of them, mentioned that there is no program for this in Hawaii yet. So nobody really knows how to do it effectively. And so that being said, I don't know that for the sake of our specific community that we have a number to put on it just yet. I know that there's programs elsewhere in the nation that might be comparable, but I do not have a specific answer to that at this time. Hopefully we can provide that through MM soon.
Awesome. Well, I think that's it for questions, Sydney. We are going to hand it back over to Doug for some closing remarks, but awesome work and amazing job.
All right, so just to wrap up, thank you again, everyone, for calling in and listening to the incredible work that the interns have done for the past 10 weeks. As I mentioned before, we have the internship program open for the summer. So if you know anyone that might be interested in partaking in this incredible experience, please let them know, have them reach out to us, or if you yourself are interested, do the same. But with that, I really want to thank everyone for calling in. They do an incredible amount of work over the 10 weeks that they are here. And so it's really good for them to be able to share it with others so that other people can see what an amazing job they have done. So mahalo and enjoy the rest of your Wednesday.